Welcome, guys, to a special episode. I have a very special guest with me today.
Hello.
I've known this person for a while, for some years now, high school days going back that far. And just someone who I admire and really feel inspired by the work that she's done in the music industry and the career that she's kind of paved out for herself. So
Thank
I'm
you.
very happy to have you on. But just to kind of give the viewers a little bit of your accolades and some of the things that you've done. She actually was the junior manager for digital marketing at Warner Brothers Records. Yeah. And she's actually working for the Grammys Museum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing the social media and marketing.
Digital there too, yeah.
Awesome. So, this is Melissa, guys. So,
Hello.
Melissa, welcome to The Bump.
Thank you.
And I just kind of want to start off, just starting, your musical journey. What was your first experience or, exposure to music? Was it, hearing your parents, what they play? How did you just come about into music?
Yeah, I would say I was very blessed to grow up in a household that my parents were always playing so many different types of music. I could remember I have memories of my dad dropping us off at elementary school and playing Phil Collins and Duran Duran. These were albums that he played excessively, you know. So
yeah.
And then my mom too, she did nursing school out in Mexico City, and where they're from Morelos. It's not too far from the main city, so I think there was a lot of influence there too, and they've just always had a very diverse taste. And my mom was the one that exposed me to artists like The Doors.
Wow.
But at the same time, they're from Mexico, so they had these great Latin artists, you have the Juan Gabriels, you have Los Angeles Negros, or even Maná. Maná was my first concert that they took me to when I was a kid. So I was very blessed to grow up in a household where there was always varied music playing. And I mean, they were very supportive in a sense that it was very rare when they would try to limit what we were listening to or watching. So because of that, me and my siblings were able to kind of find our own distinct tastes. And my older brother was the one who he would have Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style or or the Fugees or something, and on CD, and we were just annoying little I was an annoying little sister would steal his CDs, and then my little brother grew up and was the rap focused one out of all of us. So it was always a mix of
so you
everything.
had exposure to a little bit of everything pretty much.
Yeah. And
that's cool.
I'm the middle child, so I kind of keep to myself, but I was able to kind of absorb everything.
Exactly,
for sure.
That's cool though, because I had the opposite bringing. So I was limited to Radio Disney and
really?
That kind of upbringing until my cousins exposed me to Bone Thugs and Harmony and
gotcha.
Eminem, and then my uncle got me into house music. So I got that way later on. So that's cool that you had from the very get-go supportive parents and siblings and stuff.
Yeah, although I will say growing up in a household where my parents were they kind of had the immigrant mentality, because they are immigrants. It's very tough even to this day to be a very passionate music listener, just because I didn't grow up being exposed to every single thing that maybe someone who is American their family has had generations and generations of stuff here. I feel I'm still constantly looking back retroactively and trying to find other types of music that maybe I wasn't exposed to. For example, I would say my parents definitely played all different types, but one genre specifically that I'm really into nowadays is Motown.
Oh wow, okay.
Soul and funk, and that's very prominent in Black culture, where people are they listen to that growing up. You have artists like Tyler the Creator that would listen to Anita Baker, Erykah Badu, because
he sampled the Gap Band. That's another funk record,
and it's maybe I wasn't primarily exposed to that as a child, but now as an adult, I'm able to look back and kind of be this is what I want to listen to. But it kind of sucks because you're kind of a misfit to I don't know, to like society and like culture if you do that, because it's like people make you feel like you should already know that. And that's I think that's a very tough feeling, like when you're like an avid music listener, because it's like no one should ever make you feel like you should already know something. Like people should encourage each other to you know, discover new things, and if they're late to it, like maybe there was other factors for that, you know?
I think people are kind of closed off or sheltered because they're like, oh, it's maybe somebody who's trying to appropriate on that culture or whatever. So I definitely feel that way when like I started listening to funk records and disco, because I've been diving back into the history of house music. So Motown and disco like go hand in hand with like all that scene. So like going to certain places, and like if I don't dress a certain way, or like I'm not someone who already should know about it, you can kind of get like that pushback. So I know where you're coming from right there. But what I was gonna go back to was so like what made you like want to pursue like a career in music? Like when did you decide that's what you wanted to do?
I would say maybe like growing up. Like obviously like touching back on like my influences and stuff, I always loved music. I don't know how to like play or write or make music or anything like that, and like I feel like I am a creative person, but not to an extent that somebody who's like an artist is. And but I've always been also very like business you know, minded, and like a little bit more like critical thinking than like a lot of my creative friends, you know. So when I got to college, I took I think it was like an intro to like, it was like some music course, and like we kind of just like sat down and talked about like different types of music. And I don't know, I just remember being in that class, and there was like one day that I was like, oh, like I should try to like find a job in music, you know. And like I originally wanted to do like a magazine, because I really like writing. Like I was always very good at English, and like I remember I sat down, like it's really rare that I ever sit down with my dad and kind of just like talk about that, but he's like always been very supportive of like, you know, crazy ideas like that of us growing up. And I remember one time I had like lunch with my dad, and he's like, I want to know more about your magazine idea, like what do you want to do?
That's cool.
And I was like, oh, I want to like, you know, like go see shows and like write about it and stuff. And he was kind of just like, you should do that. And I think right then and there, that's when I kind of realized like, oh, like if I really wanted to, I could, you know. And then there was like other factors too. Like I've always been like, I think our generation, like we're children of the internet essentially. And like because my parents didn't censor us of what we were doing when we were kids, like I remember being on MySpace and like you know, being just like a diehard like fangirl, like going into like these boards and like talking about bands and stuff. And I met friends on MySpace. One of the girls that I met, she later in life ended up becoming like an intern at Warner Brother Records.
Oh wow, okay.
And so I hit her up because this was like when I was in college, and I was thinking about how she was already an intern there, and we've kind of been acquaintances because of MySpace. I like just hit her up one day out of the blue, and I was like, hey, like, do you have any advice for, you know, like trying to get an internship there? And she was just like, oh, well, like send me your resume and like I'll forward it. And she did, and like they ended up picking me to be an intern, and because of that I ended up getting a full-time job there. And I started working at the label in digital marketing. And like granted, at the time I was a digital marketing intern that like eventually turned into like a coordinator role, but I had no idea like anything about digital marketing. The only background that I had was like a marketing focused background because I was in business school, you know? So but you'd be surprised. I feel like in business specifically, like if you're like a business major, like a lot of it's kind of very general, unless you're doing like a math major. Obviously you have to fucking know math in order to like do that. But like if you're like marketing, if you're like, you know, anything in like the entrepreneurial sense, like you kind of figure out aspects of business. So yeah, I think it was really good for me to kind of just get firsthand experience into that industry, and eventually I kind of just like found my way. You know?
You just kind of like paved your own path, like you know, it was like kind of you were thrown out like to the wolves, and you just kind of figured it out. You know, you you said you didn't have any prior experience, but you just kind of figured it out as you went. So that's pretty cool. But like, what was your favorite part of like that experience? Like, you know, was it going to shows, meeting artists, or just being in that industry in general? Like, what was your favorite part?
I think probably, like you said, just being in the industry, you know, because I think when you're trying to work in the music industry, the most important thing is just being there. Like, whether it's, you know, being an assistant or an intern or whatever, you know, like as long as you have like your foot in the door, like that in itself just like really feels like you're part of it, and like there's, you know, like possibilities. But I think just like being there and being able to understand why certain decisions are made in music and how that influences like the landscape and the culture and like the mainstream like consumption of it is really interesting. But also like my other favorite part is just being like exposed to a lot of the new like coming up types of like movements that are happening within music too, because since I work in digital and like social media, technology is just changing at such a crazy pace that I think in the future a lot of what music is going to be like is going to depend on the technologies and like how that can expand. I mean, it was that way in like the 80s too, like when you have all these like synths and like progs and like you have like the MPCs and whatever coming out. Like I think of like New Order, how like they really played around with like all of those synths, and it was like a little bit more like analog back then.
Well, they were originally Joy Division, so they were a post-punk hard rock band, and then Ian Curtis passed away, and then they went to like that whole new wave kind of thing and carved their own path. It was crazy.
But if you like look back, like a lot of those like changes in music were tied to technology changes too, like even disco in some sense. Like you have like Giorgio Moroder, who like you know composed like Diana Ross's like I Feel Love, and you listen to that song and it's like, you know, like it's like so different, and like you have like the disco and you have like all like technology kind of like influencing that and like making a sound for like even now we still like refer back to that. You know?
Exactly.
I think that's going to continue happening in the future in music, but just like at a very alarming rate, like crazier than we've seen it in the past.
And it's funny because you see that all across the board. I mean, you see like Kanye, he took Daft Punk and he had them produce like Black Skinhead, and so they're taking like influences from house music, rock music, and I feel like even today there are artists, rappers, whatever, that don't refer themselves to a specific genre or label. I'm not a rapper, I'm an artist. And I find that refreshing because there's sounds like you said that Giorgio Moroder, like that's crazy. Like I heard about him on a Daft Punk record, and then like there's people sampling him. I'm like, whoa, I didn't know. That's crazy. But like going back to the whole direction of music, my friend Jamie and I talked about it. So like, do you feel that songs are going to be shorter like as this like new generation comes on? For example, like Tierra Whack had an album where it was like
the 30-second thing, or the 1 minute
really
thing.
short. So do you feel like that's the new direction of music?
I don't know about the length. I will say there's like different there's a dynamic change in terms of how our consumption is gonna be, you know, or is. But I also think back, the reason I say it's not necessarily tied to length, because I think people are always gonna want quality out of music, right? But like for example, like this, for like the past year and a half, I've been really into K-pop. And it's not, you know, a lot of people, like when I say that, they're kind of like weirded out because they're like, oh, like she just like likes boy bands, right? And like, yeah, I do like boy bands. But I do think one thing that's very fascinating about that whole, you know, the Korean pop music industry is just that these bands they're essentially made for public consumption. And the content that they're pumping out, I mean, there's an endless amount of content. Like, you know, BTS is like obviously the biggest act in K-pop. I mean, they put out vlogs, they go live, they tweet, they do it all, right? Like at this like really crazy rate, and that fans are kind of like now programmed to like want. Like it's like just keep giving me content and content and content. I think in music it's gonna be that way. I mean, we see artists nowadays like Rosalia that are you know, they're creating these visually stunning music videos to accompany great music, and we want more of it. I think that's what's gonna happen. I don't think it's necessarily tied to like a length of music, or the length of music. I think it's tied to the content that's also tied, or like that also has to do with the songs. Like now consumers are expecting more. They don't just want an album and like you get one music video and that's it, you know, like they want an album with every song that features a music video with like, you know, they want the remix, they want the acoustic version, they want like so many other things. So I think that's one direction that it's gonna go in. And I do see that now, like, you know, being at the label and like even in my job now, like it's so content heavy. Like I would say maybe 10 years ago, there wouldn't have been a content manager role at a label, you know, and now there is. And there's literally, like, when I left the label, there was 2 people that were managing just the YouTube side of it, because they have to make sure that when these videos go up, they're monetized, and, you know, there's, you know, the clips that are on social that drive to YouTube. Like, it's all of these things that technology again is like changing, and like we're gonna have to adapt to, and like it's also that has to tie back to like consumption needs, you know. So it wouldn't be happening if people didn't want that.
Okay. And that's a very interesting point, because like you said, 20 years ago that role would have never existed, you know.
20 years ago my role probably wouldn't have existed, you know. Like I think at the label there was like the department, the like digital marketing department now is called fan engagement, but like 20 years ago was called the internet department, like straight up. So
the internet department.
and it's so much more than the internet, but
that's crazy. But going back, because I know you mentioned Rosalia, so like I wanted to get your opinion on like the industry in general when it comes to women in music. I feel personally like most of my I do playlists and stuff, like 90% of my like artists have been women. Like people like Clyro's been killing it, Kylie Uchis, this band called Automatic that has just crazy sounds. Like, where do you feel it is now, and if you could change something, what would you change?
I would say there's like 2 parts to this question, because part of me has a different view on it because I've been a female working in a male driven industry. In terms of like artistry and like the representation of women within music, I would say it's growing. I can't really say if it's been an authentic change. Like I don't know if it's because we actually want to champion these women. I kind of feel like maybe it's because we live in a more politically correct society now, so these labels want to market women because people are going to buy it, just because we want this like diversity. I don't know if it's because they actually want to represent these women and like put them on that platform. I think it's because there's money tied
They're
to
monetizing like the movement.
Which is kind of a cynical view, because I do think as a woman that's just like a fan of music, it's awesome to see other women in that you know, at that caliber. So I hope it does continue to change for you know, like in the future. Like I hope I continue seeing more of that as a fan. But also just like being a woman in the industry, like I think that's also part of the reason why I'm like a little bit more cynical, just because in my job and my career I've had to learn how to manage the male ego, you know. I think often in the industry, and every single industry, you know, but especially in music, like women are boxed. There's kind of like they try to put you in one place, and that's kind of like if you break out from that, it's kind of looked at as like weird, you know. So I would say like any woman that wants to go into music, like they should just really try to diversify their work in a sense of like so they don't get boxed later on, you know. But I would also say, just like going back to like managing that male ego, like I think a lot of times when I was younger in my career, I really struggled to find my corporate identity.
Okay.
Just because it was hard for me to not be myself, you know, like,
right.
Obviously I come from like an immigrant family, and I'm a
Mm-hmm.
Latina, and I'm young, you know, and like those factors in itself are very like judged and like frowned upon.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that I've had to like really take those factors and own them and
Mm-hmm.
realize like this is who I'm gonna be.
Yeah.
But I have to play my role when it comes to being at my job, because I can't be too much of that.
Yeah. You can't be the loudest voice in the room
Yeah,
and
like
stuff.
I can't be too much of that. And that was a struggle for me, because obviously that's who I actually am, but I have to learn how to do that in a way that's, you know, catering to what white society wants me to be. It's a struggle.
Yeah, it's difficult finding that balance.
Yeah. And I would say as a woman, it's even harder, because already in society we're expected to be submissive to the needs of males, and we're supposed to compete for, you know, things that shouldn't matter. You know, like we compete for the attention of, you know, males and all that, but we should be competing to like make ourselves better and like be in these roles that have been traditionally held by males in the past.
And that's what I was going to say. I was like,
know?
I think it would help if a lot more women were running labels or in positions of power and management. And that's kind of the reason why I admire you, because you're the type of person who took that initiative and just went dive, you know, right into the industry. And like, you know, I wanted to get your opinion on that, because I think it's very important, especially now that we're coming to a new decade, right? You know, hopefully there's a lot of change for the better, you know, more women in the industry, not just being the artists, but being the managers, being the distributors and all that. And I think that would help tenfold, like the whole situation for women in music, I think. So
yeah, I mean, I think it all has to do with like a confidence level too. I think I'm still very new in my career, even though I've been working like at the label or whatever, you know, for I've been in it for a second, but I'm still very new in my career, and I still feel like part of being a woman is like finding the confidence within yourself to be authentic. And like I think that's going to be a lifelong journey for me, but I do think if I could like give advice to women is to like kind of just find your safe spaces. When a few years back I watched a Kathleen Hanna documentary. I think it's called Riot Girl, and she said something in it that really stuck with me. But she was talking about how like a girl's bedroom can be a utopia for creativity. And that really like kind of stuck with me, because when I was growing up, I would spend a lot of time in my room, and it was because like I felt like it was a safe space for me. Like I could be imaginative and like dream and like think about things and like sit there and like listen to music, and like I don't really think that back then I realized like how necessary that was for me. And it was like really awesome to kind of just like have a place where I could sit and like really have these like visions and like maybe one day
explore your creativity,
explore the creativity, right?
Go for it.
So I would say like for women, like I would just really recommend to like find that safe space, whether it's, you know, going to like a friend's place or like going to like a recreation center, or like even if it's another person, just find a place where you feel comfortable being yourself and exploring that creativity, because I think right now, like especially in the landscape of, you know, gender and all that, it's still very hard to do that publicly, you know. So that's one advice that I would give women. And also I think part of being like a young Latina in the industry is like really like I really want to focus on like being my authentic self and like finding what it is that I really like, because I want to be confident in my skin enough that other girls who are like me or who are like young and Latina and stuff can kind of look and be like, oh well, she's doing it, like that, like that would have been so cool for me to see growing up, as like other like young Latinas, or like not even young but just like brown girls like being in those positions, and I'm sure that would have like really helped me feel like, oh, I can actually do that.
It's a feeling of empowerment.
Yeah. So I think that's cool. That's definitely something like if me talking about myself like empowers like a young girl to feel like they can do something like that one day, like that in itself for me is like enough of a reward, you know?
Exactly. It doesn't matter if you reach 500 people or 5. You know, you're making an impact, and that's all that matters. So,
for sure.
Kind of closing thoughts. Like, I know we're going into a new decade and everything. There's a whole lot going on with the music industry. What are you excited for? What are you listening to? And what are you looking forward to in 2020?
Yeah, I think a new decade. It sounds so crazy when you say that.
2020. I'm still not used to that.
Because I know that's been thrown around a lot these days just because it is like the end of the year. But I think I'm very much looking forward to seeing like world music come to light. Like kind of tied to like your question of what I'm listening to. Like I've been listening to this artist recently called Rema.
Okay.
And he's a Nigerian singer, rapper, and he like had like Obama listed one of his songs as like one of his top summer songs or whatever. Yeah. And he's very like Afrobeat dance hall vibe, and I'm just like, I like it just because, like, you know, growing up in a Latin household, like, you dance and you know, like, that's how it is. And it's just fun to listen to. And I'm kind of just, like, in awe that I'm like, oh, like, there's a whole vibe, like, going out there in, like, Nigeria. And, like, they're, like, you know, they kind of, like, have, like, American influences, which that's not why I'm interested. But, like, they have, like, this, like, American influence.
But they put their own spin on it.
But then it's them. And then it's like, wow, like, what's going on here? It's so interesting. But it's, like, so cool now that, like, the internet has allowed for, you know, those things to pop up.
Right.
And I'm like, I would not be surprised if, like, I saw fucking, like, Drake hop on one of his tracks. Because, you know, he's all about that dance hall, like, vibe, you know. But that's going to be really cool to see. You know, just, like, what do other countries who traditionally haven't had these tools accessible to them, because like honestly in the 80s I don't think anybody who was from a third world country would be spending money on a 808 or like a prog synth, you know. But now it's like you have it at your fingertips, you have it at your phone, you have it you know, on your laptop, and it's a little cheaper than it was before. So I think it's going to be really cool to see like the world influence on music. And, like, we're kind of already seeing it with the rise of K-pop and, like, you know, all these other things.
Reggaeton has been, like, crazy everywhere.
You know, like, that's going to be really fascinating for me to see. But I don't know. I don't know what to expect. in the
Are there any albums, like, you're excited for? Or, like, you know,
I think selfishly, like, all my favorite artists that haven't released anything recently, like I obviously like want them to continue to release music, but I don't know. I think just thinking in the next year, I mean obviously Tame Impala, like I've been a big Tame Impala fan, so that'll be cool to see. I want Tyler to release more music. Igor
Frank, hopefully,
was like Frank. You know, like those are all like my like really big artists that I always listen to, but I'm just excited to see like what else is out there. Because I'm not gonna lie, like being in the industry, like I get a little bit bored with music sometimes, and it feels like I'm listening to the same thing over again. So I just want to know like what else is out there that I haven't heard before that's like stimulating to your ears. You know?
And it's funny that you bring up the world thing, because like I felt the same way. I was in a rut. Like I still am having a hard time diving back into hip hop, but slowly through my friends and stuff, being introduced to stuff that, you know, I should have known about, but I didn't. I'm going backwards. But also, like, I've been exploring a lot of French records, Italian disco records. And I'm like, there's a whole other world that we don't know about. And like you said, now that everything is more accessible, you can literally record a song today and put it up in the next 5 minutes. I think that's awesome. And I think it's going to expose people to a whole different thing that we didn't even know about. So that's exciting.
And I like that you touched on the theme of, like, going back retrospectively and like finding things, because like I probably now like with technology can find like obscure French music if I really wanted to, that's from like the 1970s, you know, like so that's really cool. Where like in the past it's like that would be like crate digging culture, is like going and like finding those records physically. Now I'm kind of just like, oh, you can do that online. That sounds so bad. I bet you like all the old heads are like, no, you have to like crate dig, you know? But no, you can find it online. And I think for me, like I do that a lot too. Like I was listening to Mad Lib's like what is it called? I think it's called like Shades of Blue. Okay. But it's like the blue like the Blue Note Records influenced one. And I was listening to that, like I was fascinated by it because I didn't know about Blue Note Records. That probably sounds bad, but it's like one of like the most prominent jazz labels. Like I mean Miles Davis, and you have like Art Blakey and like all these people that were under that label. And he kind of went back in and like recreated a lot of those songs. But yeah, I like that is cool too. Like just like listening to records and going back and like finding like the influences for that. That's something I want to do in like the upcoming decade as well. I want to continue like finding like the source for a lot of the music that we hear nowadays.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of influence, and there's a lot of people who are taking, not just sampling, but like creating it and putting their own spin on it. Like you were mentioning I think it was the Ethiopian, or what was it?
Nigerian.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There was an Alchemist album where he did it, I forget it was Budgie, and they did it like all on African sounds and put their own spin on it. And like I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, and I want to go back and listen to like, where did that come from? So it's exciting. You know, people are getting creative. People are stepping outside of their comfort zones and experimenting with sounds. And it's great because, you know, like I said, I've been in a rut lately where I have that crave to like hear something different or something new, you know. And I'm excited that you're going back because I know I'm doing the same thing too as well, but don't feel discouraged, you know.
I hope not. Yeah, but it'll be exciting to see what comes in the next few years. I'm like, hopefully the planet doesn't die before then, but
right? Yeah, it's for real.
But yeah, I'm excited. I feel very blessed and lucky to be able to work in the music industry and like, you know, like kind of find the inspiration and like continue learning more about music. That is something I'll never take for granted. And I'm very much for the youth finding their own sound too. Like I gotta admit to myself, I'm getting older. Like I can't, like I'm not as like into it. I'm not hip with it, you know. But I look at people like Pharrell that are just like they have this like youthful energy, and they're so young like mentally, like in a good way, you know. Not
and he's
like
50 and he's crazy.
It's like he's like cooler than like all of us combined, you know. Like I want to be that when I grow up. I want to like be like him and just continue to like champion the youth and like find like the cool stuff, but like not be like the old weird lady that like is into like the young stuff, you know. Like I want to be like still like curating it and like putting like that on a platform, you know, like really just a supporter of like youth and their culture. And
that's the way it should be, instead of being that angry old head.
Like the bitter old head, but which I can be, but I like kids. Have to remind myself, I'm like, I was young once too, and I can't do that, but
exactly. It just comes with the times, you know, with the age and stuff. It's just the mentality though. But
I'm still young, but you know what I mean. So
well, I want to thank you so much for coming. I really wanted to get your opinion on the industry in general, about women in music, the empowerment. I think you're doing a great job, and I want to hopefully put this out there, you know, to, like you said, reach people. Maybe it influences somebody to go out there and like pursue that career, pursue that crazy dream. So I do thank you so much for coming. Hopefully get to talk to you again soon. Maybe when I'm out in LA, we'll get some Korean barbecue or something.
We'll have to do this like LA. In LA, like, you know, but
that'd be dope. But thank you so much, Melanie
and
Melissa, and
thanks
thank you guys for watching The Bump. Until next time, peace.
Bye.